living in Hartford a long time. The man I'm talking about is Sam Clemens of Hannibal, Missouri and Hartford, Connecticut. And the name he made known and loved throughout the world is the name he wrote under, Mark Twain. Very enjoyable ride, John. Thank you. We'd like you to spend the next half hour with us as we take you back a dozen years or so when Channel 3 did a television program about Mark Twain and this wonderful house here on Farmington Avenue in Hartford. The program was fun to do, and the folks at WFSB decided it would be appropriate to run it today, November 30th, the 150th anniversary of Mark Twain's birth. Now, Mark Twain's own words were used to describe the rooms in the house, and they were spoken by a famous stage and movie actor who got his start here in Hartford, the late Ed Begley.
A Connecticut Yankee in Mark Twain's house is brought to you in part by your Connecticut Chevrolet dealers and Burger King.
I was looking for the guide, you know, the guide to show me through the house, your house. You'll have to forgive me if I'm a little surprised to see you. I really didn't expect to find you here in your house. Thank you. Well, I've read a lot of your books, but this is the first time I've ever been in your house. So this is the house that Mark Twain built.
Samuel L. Clemens, his maiden name, as a humorist not unknown to fame, as author or architect all the same, at auction or drama always game, an extravagant wag whom none can tame, he lives in the house that Mark built.
If I recall correctly, Mr. Clemens, you moved into this house in 1874, 4 years after your marriage to Miss Olivia Langdon of Elmira, New York. What was she like? How did you meet her?
I saw her first in the form of an ivory miniature in her brother Charlie's stateroom when she was in her 22nd year. I saw her in the flesh for the first time in New York in the following December. She was slender and beautiful and girlish, and she was both girl and woman. She remained both girl and woman to the last day of her life. I have compared and contrasted her with hundreds of persons, and my conviction remains that hers was the most perfect character I have ever met.
And here's another fine likeness here in the corner of the drawing room. You used this room and the library for your amateur theatricals, didn't you, Mr. Clemens? I guess your children and some of the neighbors performed everything from Greek drama to Mark Twain's Prince and the Pauper.
Yes, we played The Prince and the Pauper a number of times in our house to seated audiences of 84 persons, which was the limit of our space, and we got great entertainment out of it. Our children and the neighbors' children played well, easily, comfortably, naturally, and with high spirit. How was it that they were able to do this? It was because they had been in training all the time from their infancy. Those little chaps, Susie and Clara, invented charades themselves in their earliest years and played them for the entertainment of their mother and me.
Cigar? Yes, thank you. I guess a lot of cigars have gone up in smoke in this room. You know, sir, you always struck me as a man who liked a good cigar.
I have always bought cheap cigars. I have never smoked costly ones, and whenever I go to a rich man's house to dinner, I conceal cheap cigars about my person as a protection against his costly ones. Now, whenever I buy a cigar that costs 6 cents, I'm suspicious of it. When it costs 4 1/4 or 5 cents, I smoke it with confidence.
I recall reading something you wrote about the cigars you gave to your fellow members of the Monday Evening Club, I think it was.
The Monday Evening Club still exists. The meetings began about the 1st of October and were held in private houses of the members every fortnight thereafter, throughout the cold months until the 1st of May. There was an essay and a discussion. The essayists followed one another in alphabetical order through the season. The wives of these people were always present. It was their privilege. It was also their privilege to keep still. They were not allowed to throw any light upon the discussion. After the discussion, there was a supper, talk, and cigars. Well, that night at the club, George, our colored butler, came to me when the supper was nearly over, and I noticed that he was pale. Normally, his complexion was a clear black and very handsome, but now it had modified to old amber. He said, "Mr. Clemens, what are we going to do? There's not a cigar in the house but those old wheeling long nines. Can't nobody smoke them but you. They kill at 30 yards. It's too late to telephone. We couldn't get any cigars out from town. What can we do? Ain't it best to say nothing and let on that we didn't think?" "No," I said, "that would not be honest. Fetch the long nines," which he did. George brought the box, which had caved in on all sides, looking the worst it could, and began to pass them around. Reverend Dr. Parker was the first man to light. He took 3 or 4 heroic whiffs, then gave it up. He got up with the excuse that he had to go to the bedside of a dying parishioner, which I knew was a lie, because if that had been the truth, he would have gone earlier. Reverend Dr. Burton was the next man. He furnished a pretext, and you could see by the sound of his voice that he didn't think much of the pretext, and he was vexed with Parker for getting in ahead with a dying client. Reverend Joe Twitchell followed with a good and hearty pretext that he had to go now because he must take the midnight train for Boston. Boston was the first place that occurred to him. He would have said Jerusalem if he had thought of it. At 5 minutes to 11, all of those people were out of the house.
You know, Mr. Clemens, your Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer are as loved today as they ever were. But all your storytelling wasn't in books, was it? Didn't you spend a lot of time here by this Scottish fireplace in the library, making up stories for your children?
I remember the storytelling days vividly. They were a difficult and exciting audience, those little creatures. If they brought me a picture and required me to build a story to it, they would cover the rest of the page with their pudgy hands to keep me from stealing an idea from it. Once, Clara required me to build a sudden tale out of a plumber and a boa constrictor, and I had to do it. She didn't know what a boa constrictor was until he developed in the tale. Then she was better satisfied with it than ever.
Of all your children, sir, Susie seemed the most like you. She was a writer too, wasn't she?
When Susie was 13 and was a slender little maid with plaited tails of copper-tinged brown hair down her back, she secretly and of her own motion and out of love added another task to her labors, the writing of a biography of me. She begins in this way. We are a very happy family. We consist of Papa, Mama, Jean,
Clara, and me. It is Papa I am writing about, and I shall have no trouble in not knowing what to say about him, as he is a very striking character. Papa's appearance has been described many times, but very incorrectly. He has beautiful gray hair, not any too thick or any too long, but just right. A Roman nose, which greatly improves the beauty of his features. Kind blue eyes and a small mustache. He has a wonderfully shaped head in profile. He has a very good figure. In short, he is an extraordinarily fine-looking man. All his features are perfect, except that he hasn't extraordinary teeth. His complexion is very fair, and he doesn't wear a beard. He is a very good man and a very funny one. He has got a temper, but we all of us have in this family. He is the loveliest man I ever saw or ever hope to see.
And oh, so absent-minded. As I read it now, after all these many years, it is still a king's message to me, and brings me the same dear surprise it brought me then, with the pathos added of the thought that the eager and hasty hand that sketched it and scrawled it will not touch mine again.
Her sudden death when she was only 24 must have been a terrible shock for you. At the time, Mrs. Clemens and Clara were aboard ship, and you were in England.
The last 13 days of Susie's life were spent in our own house in Hartford, the home of her childhood, and always the dearest place in the earth to her. About her, she had faithful old friends. At the hour when my wife and Clara set sail for America, Susie was in no danger. 3 hours later, there came a sudden change for the worse. Meningitis set in, and it was immediately apparent that she was death-struck. That was Saturday, the 15th of August. About 1 in the afternoon, Susie spoke for the last time. It was only one word that she said when she spoke that last time, and it told of her longing. She groped with her hands and found Katie and caressed her face and said, "Mama, how gracious it was that in that forlorn hour of wreck and ruin, with the night of death closing around her, she should have been granted that beautiful illusion, that the latest vision which rested upon the clouded mirror of her mind should have been the vision of her mother." She fell into unconsciousness and so remained 2 days and 5 hours until Tuesday evening at 7 minutes past 7, when release came.
Oh, here's that wonderful old bed. You bought it in Venice, I understand.
The most comfortable bedstead that ever was, with space enough in it for a family, and carved angels enough surmounting its twisted columns and its headboard and footboard to bring peace to the sleepers and pleasant dreams.
The children liked to remove these cherubs and play with them, didn't they?
They were never allowed a peaceful day, a reposeful day, or a restful Sabbath. In course of time, they showed wear. It was because they had so many and such violent adventures in their romantic careers.
Having worked on the river and been with rough characters in mining camps and places like that, I imagine you could use some pretty salty language when you had to. I'm thinking of an incident here in the bedroom that you mentioned in your autobiography.
I went into the bathroom one morning and carelessly left the door 2 or 3 inches ajar. It was the first time I'd ever failed to take the precaution of closing it tightly. Then I put on a shirt. And this time the button was missing. My temper jumped up several degrees in a moment, and my remarks rose accordingly, both in loudness and vigor of expression. I flung up the window and threw the shirt out. It fell upon the shrubbery where the people on their way to church could admire it if they wanted to. Still rumbling and thundering distantly, I put on another shirt. Again, the button was absent. I augmented my language to meet the emergency and threw the shirt out of the window. I was too angry, too insane to examine the third shirt, but put it furiously on. Again, the button was absent, and that shirt followed its comrades out of the window. Then I straightened up, gathered my reserves, and let myself go like a cavalry charge. In the midst of that great assault, my eye fell upon that gaping door, and I was paralyzed. I tried to hope that Mrs. Clemens was asleep, but I knew better. I could not escape by the window. It was narrow and suited only to shirts. I made up my mind to boldly loaf through the bedroom with the air of a person who had not been doing anything. I had to stop in the middle of the room. I hadn't the strength to go on. I turned, and my memory of what I saw is still vivid after all these years. Against the white pillows, I saw the black head. I saw that young and beautiful face. Then my wife's lips parted, and from them issued my latest bathroom remark. I tried to keep from bursting, and I succeeded until she gravely said, "There, now you know how it sounds." Oh, then I exploded. I said, "Oh, Livy, if it sounds like that, God forgive me, I will never do it again." Then she had to laugh herself. Both of us broke into convulsions and went on laughing until we were exhausted.
Another cigar? No, I think one wheeling long nine will hold me for some time. Now, here in the billiard room, this is where you and your Hartford cronies would get together for a game or two and argue about politics and the news of the day. By the way, Mr. Clemens, were you a Republican or a Democrat?
In the community, I was regarded as a Republican, but I had never so regarded myself. As early as 1865 or 66, I had had this curious experience, that whereas up to that time I had considered myself a Republican, I was converted to no party independence by the wisdom of a rabid Republican. This was a man who was afterward a United States Senator, and upon whose character rests no blemish that I know of, except that he was the father of William Randolph Hearst, and therefore grandfather of yellow journalism that calamity of calamities. One day, he said, to lodge all power in one party and keep it there is to ensure bad government and the sure and gradual deterioration of the public morals. The parties ought to be so nearly equal in strength as to make it necessary for the leaders on both sides to choose the very best men they can find. Democratic fathers ought to divide up their sons between the two parties if they can. It seemed to me that this unlettered man was at least a wise one, and I have never voted a straight ticket from that day to this. I have never belonged to any party from that day to this. I have never belonged to any church from that day to this. I have remained absolutely free in those matters. And in this independence, I have found a spiritual comfort and a peace of mind quite above price. The loveliest home that ever was, bewitchingly bright and splendid and homelike and natural, with its delicious dream of harmonious color and its all-pervading spirit of peace and serenity and deep contentment.
Get set for espionage and suspense when Dustin Hoffman and Sir Laurence Olivier star in Marathon Man, next on Channel 3's Showcase Theater.